Naš gost je Claes De Vreese, profesor sa sveučilišta u Amsterdamu. Professor De Vreese, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much.
So, you're a professor of artificial intelligence and society. You know everything about things that bother us, or we even don't know that bother us, you know, from automation, algorithms, artificial intelligence in democratic processes. When we look at the current situation globally and in Europe in particular, do you think that you will need more and more students in your field because of what we're experiencing?
I think we need a lot more students in our fields, and I especially think that we need a lot more students who really also have a good understanding of the societal impact of what we are seeing. We have many students who are interested in algorithms and the development of AI, and that's really important to drive innovation and also to look at our economies for the future. But my goodness, we also really need students who understand both the regulatory challenges in this place, how do you ensure human rights, what kind of ethics do we want to apply in this space, but also how do people actually deal with these technologies and appropriate them in their daily lives? So we need many more students of AI, but also the societal aspects of AI.
Talking about societal aspects of AI, if I would to ask you to have a rep for daily news, what you've been, you know, into this lot more than we have it out there in our public conversation debate in the recent couple of years. So what do you see, especially in terms of societal impact, like the biggest challenges or obstacles, and we can, you know, we can go from bad to good things?
Yeah, I think one of the real changes in just the last sort of year and a half has been that a lot of developments in AI world were sort of in the world of the nerds and the world of the specialists, right? And then there were products that are sort of occasionally would make it for more mass consumption. But with the arrival of generative AI technologies that both pertain to text, but also now visuals and sound, and making that available to everybody. So no longer through an expensive and very hard to program and figure out type of approach to this, but really something that is at the fingertips for every one of us once we have a smartphone in our hands. That is a real game changer. That technology is not really new, but it allows all of us to be producers and users of AI technologies. And that is meaningful, especially when we look at something like misinformation and disinformation. We have had a long training of our brains and our minds to think that everything that is information is produced by humans. And we have over the last years gone through a better understanding of saying, well, there are also humans and actors out there that have ill intents, that are, you know, deliberately spreading information that is inaccurate, and they do so with malign intent. But now the challenge will become over the next years that we can produce so much content that is inauthentic, and it is both sound, it is visuals, and it is text, that we can basically flood internet, so to speak, with all this content, and that will make it very hard for us, many of us, to judge what content is authentic. So I'm not saying, you know, a question of here whether something is truthful or not, but simply whether it is made by a human or whether it is something that is auto-generated. That is a real significant shift in the AI development, that so many of us now have these technologies basically at our fingertips.
But what you said, it is unprecedented. We had technology, we had manipulation, we had propaganda, we had, you know, Stalin putting people's faces, we had, you know, Hitler and, you know, the worst impact ever in our history, Holocaust of, you know, fake news and what has been done with these kind of things. But, you know, if we look at the philosophy, if we look at the paradigm shift, if we look at fundamentals of what is changing, because, you know, maybe we won't live up to see the final result or, you know, this transformation by its end, but, you know, what can you emphasize? Where is, you know, where can societies go with this kind of, you know, living room thumb change of everything that we live from? Because this is our life. This is where we are, all of us in the world.
It is indeed very important to acknowledge that, of course, it is not the first time that we in human history have been faced with challenges of propaganda or people trying to deceive us. But typically, communication technologies have been in the hands of just a few organizations or a few stakeholders. And of course, we have also, as societies, always tried to say, okay, this is important and meaningful. Can we think of ways of regulating that? Whether that was to be allowed to print newspapers, whether that was holding radio waves, whether that was allowed to be on the antenna for television. So there's always been a thought process on the side of society to say, how can we think about these quite powerful technologies and maybe see that they are not open and available for everybody, but you need to comply to specific rules when you use these technologies. With AI, and especially these models that are so easy to also use as even individual citizens or just small groups of individuals, that is a real change, right? Because now you can access an area, for example, online, and really generate content at a mass level in a very, very high pace. There are some projections that are saying that even just a few years from now, we could be looking at something like 90% of everything that is online being produced by artificial intelligence. Can you just imagine what it's like to go through information of your telephone and you have to maybe take as a starting point that 90% of what you see is not generated by humans? It flips also the discussion that we have about mis and disinformation, where we've been very much focused on saying, oh, here's a problem and here's something that might not be correct or not right. But now, going forward, what we need is maybe thinking much more about labeling and making visible what is authentic content, what has actually been verified by journalistic organizations, for example, simply because when we consume information on phones and there's so much information that could be inauthentic, finding and sifting through the work and the information that has been verified and has been produced according to, for example, journalistic standards is going to be a massive challenge. And that is really something that I believe is very different compared to these previous technologies that really require technical skills, licenses, and also had a much clearer set of rules of the game, which are not yet there in the AI world. There are, of course, attempts in the European Union and other places to regulate the use of AI, but it is still not here. And the jury is definitely not out whether or not it will be an effective regulation or not.
You've said loads of things, but I want to go to one specific, which is linked to societal picture. We live in times of huge mistrust, and of course, labeling is perfect. So just that what you're seeing is not real. But what's happening, because that is also what you work on. What's happening within our heads, in our, let's call it cognitive resilience. I like to call it. Because we experience this, maybe you can have give us some examples. For example, now with Hamas-Israel war, we saw it with Ukraine, which as a state actor kind of built its own resilience to what was coming from Russia. So what's in our mind and what's the statistics? How many people, I did my small research and I was astonished how people are, fast to click or like or share, not even thinking about it. So maybe just give us an overview on that.
Yeah, we have a real challenge because, of course, when judging information, we have been sort of trained through media literacy programs and these kind of things to try and be mindful sometimes about what it is that we are seeing and, think twice before you share and these kind of things. But we also know that we humans, part of our brain is also simply hardwired to like and engage with content that has opinions and views that we agree with. So we might share or like something that we believe that we agree with, and without doing the sort of critical reflection, is this accurate? Does it come from a good source? Do I really want to share that in the information network, etc.? Simply because we like to be engaging with viewpoints that we like, and we also like to get angry and disappointed and sort of outraged about things that we don't like. So there is a challenge with all information that some of it feeds into our brain in the way that we want to engage with it because we like it, and we also want to really express our dislike of it, regardless of whether or not we've done that sort of additional check. And with AI and with so much information coming at us, even though that we would be maybe trained to be more critical about information, we will have so much content at our hand that we will need to judge on a sort of almost continuous basis. And one of the potential biggest downside of these new AI developments is that some of the distrust that we have could grow too, right? Because if we get so trained in saying, oh, I don't know if this is made by a human, is it authentic or not? We actually know from research that can also lead over to and give spillover effects, so that we start distrusting also some of the content that has been produced according to journalistic standard or has been coming from sources that we would usually say is trustworthy. So the AI challenge is also a challenge of how do we maintain trust levels and not just become distrustful of everything.
and maybe just, to begin to close this interview, I want to ask you, we have 2024 as a super election year. 2016 was in a sense symbolic in that regard, because we saw what happened with referendum in Great Britain, with Brexit, Cambridge Analytica, and all of that. We saw what happened in the United States. So what do you expect in this super election year, especially what we saw with these simple, deep fakes that are circulating around, that people really think it's this politician or that politician, this actor or that actor saying this or that?
I'm afraid that we're walking into 2024 completely unprepared. What we know for sure is that the technology to produce and distribute a lot of misinformation is right there. It is in our face right now. We have seen in 2023 a couple of examples in Slovakia, in Poland, in other places in Europe, smaller examples of the use of this technology. I would say they have probably not been, super influential in those elections. But the important observation here is that the technology is there, and it can be weaponized and it can be utilized immediately if someone wants to do in a 2024 election. And we have become used to looking at some of the big platforms online for trying to see the type of information that is circulating. But if you take the challenge and the power of new AI technologies and combine it also with what we're seeing in many countries, both in the global south, but also in the north, of using closed networks like Telegram and WhatsApp for also distributing some of this information. We are walking into 2024 with no AI regulation yet in place, with no real awareness of what these technologies all can do, and with a real shift towards a lot of communication taking place in closed communities. That is a powerful cocktail, and I don't want to be the pessimist in the room, but we do have to be aware that all the technologies are there for 2024 to be really, really exciting election cycle, but also one that we maybe should cross our fingers for it going right.
And just to close it, we've talked about trust, we've talked about labeling AI-generated content, but where do you see journalism? We had, a couple of weeks ago, this Paris Charter on AI and journalism being put out there by relevant news organizations or media watchdogs, how to call them. Because media is one of these traditional institutions that has lowest level of trust, or this level of trust has been created through all of these other channels that were out there causing this stir and mistrust overall.
I think if you're an optimist, you could say that the coming period of time is a sort of a renewed chance for journalism really to matter. In an age where the information and the content is so abundant, you really need agents and organizations and individuals, journalists, to guide us through that information overload. So that is if you're an optimist. But we also know that journalism is faced with a lot of challenges in itself in terms of trust levels. And we also see that journalist organizations are, of course, also users of these new technologies. So if I could give one advice to journalist companies across the globe, is that if you engage with the use of AI technologies, do so in an extremely mindful way, do so in an extremely transparent and open way. Your trust relationship with your readers and your viewers is really going to come down to you reporting about these new developments, also explaining and being transparent about the degree to which you use them in your own organization, and then in the next level, taking audiences by the hand and helping us through that next period of time where there will be such a flood of auto-generated content. So it's a big opportunity for journalism, but at a difficult and critical juncture for journalism. So
Claes De Vreese, thank you so much, and looking forward for our, further talks, because I think 2024 will be really, interesting year. Let's call it like that.
I look forward to talking more.
Thank you.